"Take of your clothes now," said the lonely rancher to the giant bride. She did. The rancher froze. "Take off your clothes now." Samuel Thornton's voice cracked across the lamplit bedroom, his calloused rancher's hands trembling as he spoke to the woman who'd arrived on the 4:15 train, his mail-order bride. But when Moira McAllister stood to her full 6'4", her fingers moving to the buttons of her traveling dress, the lonely rancher, who'd spent 3 months writing letters to a woman he'd never seen, took one step back, then another. She did exactly what he asked. The fabric whispered to the floor, and Samuel Thornton, the man who'd broken wild horses, survived 2 winters alone and buried his dreams in the Montana soil. Froze. His chest stopped mid-breath. His eyes went wide. Because the giant mail-order bride standing before him wasn't what he'd imagined, wasn't what he'd prepared for, wasn't what his lonely heart knew how to want. But why would a simple rancher's command shatter him so completely? What had this towering woman revealed that no photograph, no letter, no promise could have prepared him for? And why was Moira McAllister, this giant of a bride, now watching him with tears pooling in her storm-grey eyes? Not shame, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Samuel's boots scraped against the wooden floor as he backed into the dresser. The oil lamp flickered, throwing shadows that made Moira look even taller, even more impossible. She stood there in nothing but her undergarments, her shoulders broad as a farmhand's, her arms thick with muscle that spoke of years carrying burdens no woman should carry. But it wasn't her size that froze him. It was the scars. Long white lines crisscrossed her back like a map of suffering. Burn marks dotted her ribs, and across her collarbone a scar shaped like a horseshoe, the kind a man makes when he uses his belt buckle as a weapon. Samuel's hands started shaking worse. His throat closed up. Because he'd written to the agency asking for a wife, someone to cook and clean and maybe give him sons. He'd wanted simple. He'd wanted easy. He'd wanted someone small and quiet who wouldn't ask too much of his broken heart. But Moira wasn't simple. She was a storm wrapped in skin. And those tears in her eyes, they weren't fear. They were challenge. "You asked me to undress," she said, her Irish accent thick as honey but sharp as a blade. "So I did. That's what obedient wives do, isn't it? Follow orders?" Her voice didn't shake. It didn't apologize. Samuel tried to speak, but nothing came out. His mind raced back to 3 hours earlier, when she'd stepped off that train, and every man at the station had gone silent. She'd towered over the conductor, made the horses look small, and when she'd walked towards Samuel with her one battered trunk, the town's blacksmith had whispered, "God help you, Thornton." But Samuel had squared his shoulders. He'd paid good money for a bride. He'd signed the papers. And he wasn't about to let the town see him scared. Except now, alone in this bedroom with the woman he'd legally married just 2 hours ago in the courthouse, Samuel was terrified. Not of her size, not of her strength, but of the fact that he'd given a command expecting submission, and instead he'd found defiance wrapped in obedience. She'd done exactly what he asked, and in doing so she'd stripped him bare too. "I didn't mean—" Samuel started, but Moira cut him off. "You didn't mean what? You didn't mean to see what you bought. You didn't mean to know who you married." She took one step toward him, then another, each footfall deliberate, and Samuel realized something that made his blood run cold and hot at the same time. This woman wasn't here because she was desperate. She was here because she was dangerous. Dangerous to his carefully controlled loneliness, dangerous to the walls he'd built, dangerous to every lie he'd told himself about what he wanted from life. The room smelled like kerosene and pine and something else. Fear, maybe, or the particular scent of 2 people who didn't know if they were supposed to be enemies or lovers. Samuel's back pressed against the dresser so hard the wood groaned. Moira stood 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the pulse beating in her throat, close enough that her shadow swallowed his. "I've been property before," she said quietly, and the softness in her voice was somehow worse than shouting. "My father sold me to a farmer in Illinois when I was 16. Told me I was too big to marry proper, too expensive to feed. Said I should be grateful any man would take me." Samuel's jaw clenched. He wanted to say something, anything, but Moira wasn't finished. That farmer, he liked to remind me daily what I cost him. $3 a week for my labor, $2 for my bed. And every time I didn't move fast enough, didn't cook right enough, didn't make myself small enough. She touched the horseshoe scar on her collarbone. He made sure I remembered my price. Samuel felt something crack open in his chest. He'd lost his own wife 4 years ago to childbirth, lost the baby too. Sarah had been small, delicate, everything the world said a woman should be. And she died screaming his name while he stood helpless, watching blood soak through the sheets. After that, Samuel had stopped praying, stopped hoping. He'd worked the ranch like a machine, speaking to no one, touching no one, feeling nothing but the weight of dirt under his nails and whiskey burning his throat at night. When his sister Agnes had suggested the mail-order bride, Samuel had resisted for months. But the loneliness had teeth. It gnawed at him in the dark. And finally, he'd written to the agency with one request: send someone who won't die on me. Someone strong. The agency had written back about Moira McAllister, a woman of exceptional stature and vigor, and Samuel had signed the papers without asking questions. He'd thought strong meant durable, reliable. He hadn't thought strong meant scarred. Hadn't thought strong meant a woman who'd look at him like she could see straight through to his coward's heart. I didn't bring you here to hurt you, Samuel finally managed, his voice rough as gravel. Moira laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. No, you brought me here to use me. There's a difference, but not much of one. She reached for her dress, still pooled on the floor, and Samuel's hand shot out before he could think. He caught her wrist. The moment their skin touched, they both froze again. Her wrist was thick, strong, warm as a furnace. His hand barely wrapped around it. For a long moment, neither of them breathed. Then Moira looked down at where he held her and back up at his face, and Samuel saw something flicker in those storm-grey eyes. Not fear, not even anger anymore. Something raw, something that looked almost like hope, and that terrified him most of all. Don't, he whispered, though he couldn't have said what he was asking her not to do. Don't leave. Don't expect anything from him. Don't look at him like maybe, just maybe, he could be different from every other man who'd hurt her. Moira's free hand came up slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, her palm pressed against his chest, right over his hammering heart. You're afraid, she said, and it wasn't a question. Yes, Samuel admitted, because lying seemed impossible with her hand there, feeling every terrified beat. Of me, Moira asked. Of this, Samuel said. Of getting it wrong again. Of not being enough. Of... His voice broke. He'd never said these words out loud, not even to himself in the dark. Of loving someone and watching them disappear. The lamp sputtered. Outside, a coyote called across the Montana plains, lonely and wild. And Moira McAllister, the giant mail-order bride who'd been bought and sold and scarred and broken, did something Samuel didn't expect. She pulled him close. Not rough, not demanding, but gentle, so gentle his knees almost buckled. She wrapped those strong arms around him and held him like he was the fragile one. Like he was the one who might shatter. And for the first time in 4 years, Samuel Thornton let himself break. Samuel didn't know he was crying until Moira's fingers brushed the tears from his cheeks. His whole body shook against hers, and he hated himself for it, hated that he was supposed to be the man, the provider, the strong one. And here he was, collapsing in the arms of a woman he'd known for less than 5 hours. But Moira didn't push him away, didn't mock him. She just held him tighter, her chin resting on top of his head, and whispered something in Irish he didn't understand, but felt in his bones. When the crying finally stopped, Samuel pulled back, ashamed to meet her eyes. But Moira's hand caught his chin, firm but not rough, and tilted his face up. "Look at me," she said. He did. And what he saw there wasn't pity, it was recognition. Like she'd been exactly where he was, drowning in grief with no one to pull her out. "My mother died when I was 12, Moira said, her thumb still stroking his jaw. "Fever took her in 3 days. My father, he never recovered. Started drinking, started gambling, started looking at me like I was livestock instead of his daughter." She paused, and Samuel could see her deciding how much to tell him. The farmer in Illinois, the one who bought me? I stayed 5 years. 5 years of being told I was too much. Too tall, too strong, too loud, too hungry, too alive. He tried to make me small. Tried to break me down until I'd fit into the little box he'd built in his mind of what a wife should be. Her voice hardened. But I wouldn't break. So one night, when he came at me with that belt buckle again, I hit back. Broke his jaw in 2 places. And I ran. Samuel's eyes widened. He'd never hit a woman in his life. Couldn't imagine it, but he'd also never met a woman who looked like she could break a man's jaw and live to tell about it. You could have killed me, he whispered, suddenly understanding the danger he'd put himself in by giving her that command, by expecting her to obey. Moira's smile was sad and knowing. I could have, but I didn't. You want to know why? Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice. Because when you froze, when you saw my scars and stepped back, your eyes didn't fill with disgust. They filled with horror, not at me, at what had been done to me. There's a difference, Samuel Thornton, and I've learned to spot it in the first 30 seconds of meeting a man. The way she said his name, soft and careful, like it was something precious, made Samuel's chest ache. He looked at this woman, this giant, beautiful, terrifying woman, and realized he'd been asking the wrong question all night. He'd been asking if he could survive being married to her. But the real question was whether she could survive being married to him. Another man who'd brought her into his home, expecting something he couldn't even name. Some hole she was supposed to fill in his broken life. I don't know how to do this, Samuel said, and his voice cracked again, but he didn't care. I don't know how to be someone's husband again. Don't know if I have anything left to give. Moira's hand moved from his chin to his chest again, palm flat over his heart. That's still beating, she said simply. That's enough for tonight. She stepped back then, giving him space, and reached for her dress. But this time, when she pulled it on, it felt different. Not like covering shame. Like choosing dignity. She buttoned it slowly, and Samuel watched every movement, memorizing the line of her shoulders, the way her hair had come loose from its pins, the quiet strength in how she held herself. When she was dressed, she walked to the bedroom door. Samuel's heart lurched. Was she leaving? Going back to the train? But Moira just opened the door and looked back at him. I'm going to make us coffee, she said. And then you're going to tell me about her. About Sarah. Because if we're going to do this, if we're going to try to build something real instead of playing pretend, we can't have ghosts standing between us. She paused in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. You asked me to take off my clothes, and I showed you my scars. Now it's your turn to undress, Samuel. Show me yours. The coffee was terrible, bitter and too strong, the way Samuel always made it when he was trying to stay awake through grief. But he drank it anyway, sitting at the kitchen table that Sarah had picked out 7 years ago, watching Moira move through his house like she was learning a new language. She touched things carefully, the chipped mug, the cast-iron skillet, the photograph on the mantel that Samuel couldn't bear to take down. It showed Sarah on their wedding day, small and smiling, in a white dress that had belonged to her mother. Moira studied it for a long time, and Samuel waited for jealousy or judgment. Instead, she just nodded, like Sarah was a person worth remembering, and sat down across from him with her own cup of terrible coffee. She was beautiful, Moira said, and there was no meanness in it, no comparison, just a statement of fact. Samuel's throat tightened. She was. Beautiful and kind and everything good. We met at a church social. She was 17, I was 19. Her father didn't want her marrying a rancher with nothing but debt and dirt, but Sarah, she had this way of making you believe everything would work out. He stared into his coffee like it held answers. We had 3 good years. Then she got pregnant, and I thought God was finally giving me something instead of taking. Thought maybe I'd done enough right to deserve a family. His hands clenched around the mug, so hard Moira worried it might shatter. She labored for 2 days. 2 days of screaming and bleeding and the midwife telling me to pray. And I did. I prayed harder than I'd ever prayed for anything. But God wasn't listening, or he was listening and didn't care. Sarah died an hour after the baby. A son, he didn't even cry. Just came out silent and blue and gone. Moira reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid and real. Samuel didn't pull away. I buried them together, he continued, his voice breaking over every word. Up on the hill where Sarah used to watch the sunset. And I told myself I'd never let anyone close again. Never risk feeling like that again. Like someone reached into my chest and tore out everything that mattered. He finally looked up at Moira, and his eyes were red-rimmed and raw. So when Agnes suggested the mail-order bride, I thought if I kept it practical, kept it simple, didn't love whoever came, then I'd be safe. I could have a wife without having a heart to break. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Moira took a long sip of the terrible coffee and set her mug down with a decisive thunk. I'm not her, she said, and Samuel flinched like she'd slapped him. But Moira kept going, her voice steady and sure. I'm not Sarah. I'll never be Sarah. I'm too tall, too scarred, too loud, and too damaged. I can't replace what you lost, Samuel, and I won't try. But here's the truth you need to hear. She leaned forward, those storm-grey eyes locked on his. You didn't bring me here to keep yourself safe. You brought me here because some part of you, some part you've been trying to kill for 4 years, still wants to live, still wants to feel something besides grief and whiskey and loneliness. Samuel opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his tongue because she was right. God help him, she was right. If he'd really wanted safe, he would have stayed alone. Would have worked himself to death on this ranch and been buried next to Sarah without ever risking his heart again. But he'd written that letter. He'd signed those papers. He'd married Moira McAllister in a courthouse with 2 strangers as witnesses because somewhere deep down, in a place he'd been afraid to look, he wanted another chance. Not at replacing Sarah, at living again. I'm terrified, Samuel whispered, and it was the most honest thing he'd said all night. I'm terrified that I'll fail you the way I failed her. That I won't be strong enough or good enough or... Moira stood up so fast, her chair scraped against the floor. She walked around the table and pulled Samuel to his feet, and suddenly they were standing chest to chest, or rather, his chest to her sternum, because even in her bare feet she had 6 inches on him. Listen to me, Moira said, her hands gripping his shoulders. You didn't fail Sarah. You didn't kill her with your love or your prayers or your not-enoughness. She died because childbirth is dangerous and bodies fail, and sometimes there's no reason, no justice, just terrible, random cruelty. And yes, you'll probably fail me in 100 small ways, because that's what people do. But failure isn't death, Samuel. Failure is just being human. Her thumbs stroked circles on his shoulders, gentle despite her strength. I've been broken by men who never even tried to see me as human, who looked at my size and my strength and saw only what I could do for them, never who I was. But you looked at my scars and cried for me. You heard what I survived and didn't tell me I was damaged goods. You showed me your ghost and trusted me not to mock your grief. She bent down slightly so they were eye to eye. That's more honesty than most marriages get in a lifetime. So here's what I'm offering. Not perfection, not salvation, not some fairy tale where we fix each other's broken pieces. Just truth. Just showing up every day and trying. Just being brave enough to fail together instead of hiding alone. Samuel felt something shift in his chest, like a door he'd nailed shut was slowly creaking open. It hurt. God, it hurt worse than staying numb. But it also felt like breathing after being underwater too long. I don't know if I can love you, he said honestly, and Moira smiled, really smiled, wide and genuine and a little heartbreaking. Good, she said, because I don't know if I can love you either. Love isn't something you know, Samuel. It's something you build, one truth at a time, one day at a time, one choice to stay instead of run. She paused and her voice got softer. So here's my first choice. I'm staying tonight. In the guest room, in this kitchen, wherever you need me to be, that feels safe. And tomorrow, we'll wake up and make terrible coffee again, and figure out the next choice. And the next. Until one day, maybe, we look at each other and realize we accidentally built something worth keeping. Samuel's hands came up and gripped her waist, feeling the solid strength of her, the realness of her. Not a ghost, not a replacement. Just Moira, standing in his kitchen at midnight, offering him the scariest thing in the world, hope. "The guest room needs cleaning," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Hasn't been used in 4 years." Moira's smile widened. "Then I guess we better get started." And as they walked together down the hall, Samuel carrying blankets and Moira carrying the lamp, neither of them noticed that the photograph of Sarah on the mantel had caught the firelight just right, making it look almost like she was smiling. Not sad, not jealous, just peaceful, like maybe she'd been waiting for someone strong enough to help Samuel find his way back to the living. Outside, the Montana wind sang through the plains, wild and free and full of promise. And inside the house, 2 broken people began the slow, terrifying work of healing. Not by forgetting their scars, but by choosing every day to show them to someone who understood that scars meant you'd survived. And survival, however messy and imperfect, was its own kind of beautiful. The lamp flickered out as Samuel set it on the guest room dresser, leaving them in darkness broken only by moonlight through the window. "Good night, Moira," he said softly. And Moira, the giant mail-order bride who'd been bought and sold and broken but never defeated, replied with words that felt like a vow. "Good night, Samuel. See you in the morning." And for the first time in 4 years, Samuel Thornton believed that morning might actually be worth waking up for. 3 weeks passed, like pages turning in a book Samuel had forgotten how to read. Every morning started the same way, terrible coffee at the kitchen table. Moira's long legs folded awkwardly under Sarah's old chairs, both of them fumbling through conversations about weather and chickens, and whether the fence in the south pasture needed mending. They were polite, careful, 2 strangers orbiting each other like planets that had forgotten how to collide. Moira slept in the guest room. Samuel slept alone in the master bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to her footsteps creak on the floorboards. Some nights he heard her crying, soft and muffled into a pillow. Other nights he heard her pacing, restless as a caged animal. But he never knocked, never asked if she was all right, because asking meant caring, and caring meant risk, and Samuel Thornton had become a coward expert at playing it safe. The town noticed, of course. Small towns always did. When Samuel and Moira went to the general store for supplies, the whispers followed them like shadows. Mrs. Henderson clutched her pearls and muttered about that giant woman like Moira was some kind of circus attraction. The blacksmith, Tom Jensen, made jokes about Samuel needing a stepladder to kiss his own wife. And Agnes, Samuel's meddling sister, cornered him outside the feed store with her arms crossed and her eyes full of judgment. "You're wasting her," Agnes said, not bothering with pleasantries. "That woman came here hoping for a life, and you're treating her like hired help." Samuel's jaw clenched. "I'm treating her with respect. Giving her space." Agnes snorted. "Space? Samuel, you're giving her loneliness. Same loneliness you've been drowning in for 4 years. And if you're not careful, you're going to wake up one morning and find her gone. Because even a woman as strong as Moira McAllister can only take so much rejection before she stops believing she's worth fighting for." The words haunted Samuel all the way home. He found Moira in the barn, mucking out stalls with an efficiency that made his hired hands look lazy. She'd rolled up her sleeves, revealing those scarred forearms, and her hair was tied back with a piece of twine. She looked powerful, capable, and completely, devastatingly alone. "You don't have to do that," Samuel said from the doorway. Moira didn't look up. "I know, but sitting in that house pretending to be a proper wife while you pretend I don't exist was making me feel crazy. At least out here I'm useful." The word hit Samuel like a fist to the gut. Useful, not wanted, not cherished, just useful. He stepped into the barn, the smell of hay and horses familiar as breathing. "Moira, I don't," she cut him off, finally meeting his eyes. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. I knew what this was when I signed those papers. A transaction, a practical arrangement. I just thought—" Her voice cracked and she looked away, angry at herself for showing weakness. "I thought maybe it could become something more. But you can't build something with someone who's still buried in the past." Samuel felt that door in his chest creak open wider, painful and necessary. "You're right," he said quietly. Moira's head snapped up, surprise flickering across her face. "I've been a coward, been hiding behind grief like it's some kind of shield that excuses me from living. But Agnes was right about something. I'm wasting you, wasting us. And Sarah," his voice broke on her name. "Sarah would have hated what I've become. She loved life so much, loved people so fiercely, and here I am, half dead and calling it safety." He took a step closer, then another. "I don't know how to stop being afraid, Moira. Don't know how to love someone without waiting for them to disappear. But I'm tired. I'm so damn tired of being alone in a house with another person, of pretending that keeping distance keeps me safe when all it does is make me miserable." Moira set down the pitchfork, her hands trembling slightly. "What are you saying, Samuel?" "I'm saying I want to try," Samuel said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff. "Really try. Not just share a house and terrible coffee, but actually build something. I want to know everything about you, what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night, what dreams you had before men tried to beat them out of you. I want to show you this ranch the way Sarah and I used to see it, full of possibility instead of ghosts. And I want—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I want to stop sleeping alone. Not because it's my husbandly right or some obligation, but because I miss having someone next to me. Miss feeling like I'm not the only person in the world." Moira's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "And if I let myself hope again and you change your mind? If you wake up one day and realize you'd rather have the ghost than the woman?" Samuel closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. They were rough and strong and real, covered in dirt from honest work. "Then I'll be the biggest fool in Montana, and you'll have every right to break my jaw like you did that farmer. But Moira, I'm already breaking. Have been for 4 years. At least, if I break trying to love you, it'll be for something worth breaking for." The barn was silent except for the horses shifting in their stalls and the wind whistling through the cracks in the wood. Then Moira did something that took more courage than running from that Illinois farm, more strength than surviving every scar on her body. She let herself believe him. She pulled Samuel close, wrapping those powerful arms around him, and whispered against his hair, "All right, Samuel Thornton. Let's try. But if we're doing this, no more separate rooms. No more polite distance. We're in this together, or we're not in it at all." Samuel pulled back just enough to look up at her, and for the first time since Sarah died, he felt something like joy trying to break through the grief. "Together," he agreed. And when Moira bent down and kissed him, tentative and questioning and full of terrified hope, Samuel kissed her back, not like he was kissing Sarah's memory, not like he was trying to replace what he'd lost, but like he was kissing Moira McAllister, the giant mail-order bride who'd seen him at his worst and decided he was still worth staying for. The kiss deepened. Samuel's hands found her waist, and Moira's found his face, cradling it like he was something precious. And somewhere in the tangle of lips and breath and two broken people deciding to be brave, they both started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could learn to be whole together. That night, Samuel didn't sleep in the master bedroom alone, and Moira didn't cry in the guest room. They lay together in the darkness, fully clothed and cautious, learning the shape of each other's breathing. Samuel traced the scars on Moira's arms while she stroked his hair, and they talked until dawn about everything and nothing, childhoods and lost dreams, and the terrifying beauty of second chances. When the sun finally rose over the Montana plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Samuel turned to Moira and said, "Good morning." And Moira, the woman who'd traveled across the country hoping for a life and found a man brave enough to try building one with her, smiled and said, "Yes, yes it is. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one." Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, whether you're in Texas, London, Nigeria, or anywhere else in the world. We want to hear from you. What did you think of Samuel and Moira's story? Have you ever had to choose between safety and the risk of love? Drop your thoughts below, and let's build a community of people who believe broken doesn't mean beyond repair. Subscribe now, and we'll see you in the next story.